Good morning. A good day out there in the Holy Land, although I don't see anybody here yet from the Holy Land. Rosh Chodesh Nissan, Nissim, miracles and miracles. So here we go. In this book, Hayom Yom, the first day of Nissan is on page 41. And first thing to note that's mentioned in the Yom Yom, we have a relief from Tachanan. The whole month we don't say Tachanan in this month of Nissan. And then we do say the Nasi, each Nasi for the days that the temple, that the Mishkan is being erected. We say the Nasi in the back of the Siddur. And in that, at the end of the Nasi, there's a Yehi Ratzon. May it be Hashem's will, it says. And so on this Yehi Ratzon, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes today's Hayom Yom that his father, the Rebbe Rashab, instructed his brother-in-law, Rebbe Rashab's brother-in-law, Rebbe Moshe Horenstein, who was a Kohen. Now the Nasi, as you say, the Nasi each day is the same sacrifice. It's discussed in many places. Then what's the difference? It has to do with the person who's bringing it and the kavanas, etc. But it's all the same, whether you're a Kohen or a Levi, etc. And so the Rebbe Rashab instructed his brother-in-law, who is a Kohen, to say the Yehi Ratzon after the Nasi, even noting that even a Kohen or Levi must say it, for it's related to Ibor. In other words, even though it doesn't distinguish, right? Most of us are not distinguished, right? We don't know from which Shevet we're coming from. The Kohen is. So why is he saying something that pertains to the notion of indistinguishability and melding with everybody else? The Kohen is separate from the rest of the people. So the answer to that is because this Yehi Ratzon, let it be Hashem's will, is coming from a level of Hashem which we call Ibor. Ibor in English means pregnant. But it's an early stage of pregnancy where there's not yet, at that early stage, no differentiation yet. And so all neshamas, Kohen, Levi, and all the tribes, which we don't know about, but all the tribes, all the differentiated tribal expressions are rooted in a single source. And therefore, since this Nasi is speaking about all of us equally, and the Yehi Ratzon encompasses all of us equally, so even a Kohen who knows where he comes from says it because at root, the Kohen is one of us, just like everyone else is one of us in that singular seminal point, which is the essence of God himself. Long-winded, yeah, but I think it needed to be explained what Ibor means. That's Hayom Yom. Now, progressing through our discussion of the height of Torah over mitzvahs, that's the side we've been talking about for a while. We'll continue lessons in Tanya, page 509. And today's classical Tanya, page 98. I'll tell you exactly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down after a colon. Okay, so we've been discussing, as I said, the primacy of Torah over mitzvahs, though we know that the other opposite goes together, like a horse and carriage, like man and woman, like marriage and other things we spoke about yesterday. It just depends which side of the coin or the relationship you're looking at. And what we're doing at this point is explaining the milas, the virtues of Torah. Now, we already have said that Torah is a deeper expression. I mean, it comes from a deeper source, a deeper source of God's expression than the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs are likened to the limbs of God, and Torah is the brain of God. It's Chabad. And we said about that therefore it's the emanation of the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, which is in Torah, comes from a deeper place, and therefore it has a deeper effect. So, for instance, we see this, and I'm not yet in the Tanya, but just a couple of things that come to mind. The Torah itself is called Torah Chaim, the Torah of life, because it's the source of life. It's the source of life in the entirety of creation. In fact, the Zohar tells us, says, that God looked into the Torah to create the worlds. And the worlds ultimately devolve to Olam Hazeh Hagashmi, which mitzvahs are taking place in. But that's a long way down, a big train, a big histalshelus, a big chain of descent before you get to the world of mitzvahs masiyas. So we see the Torah not only comes from high, but it's the vehicle with which Hashem, it's the vehicle Hashem utilized. It's the blueprint in which he consulted, he looked into it in order to bring about the whole effusion of worlds from Atzilus down to Olam Hazeh HaMaaseh, where we do the mitzvahs. That's number one. And number two, related, it's called God's wisdom. It comes from the particular place in God's brain, which is called Chochmah. Chochmas Hashem is the Torah. So it expresses the deepest part of God's expressions. I mean, it isn't essence, but it's the deepest part of God's expressions that he expresses, like we express coffee, that he pushes out of himself. Okay, so with that little background, we'll start by the colon. V'hine. So pay attention, behold. Amshacha, this drawing down of this ha'or zu, this illumination of this level of the Or Ein Sof that comes from the Chochmah, the deepest levels of God's mind, so to speak. Which a person brings down through the learning of Torah and causes to radiate throughout all the worlds and down here below of this ha'ora, of this light of the Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, al nafshe, on that person's soul through learning Torah, the al nefashis kol Yisrael, and through learning Torah, that hamshacha of that level of the Or Ein Sof also dwells, is drawn down into the neshamas of the entire Jewish people. Because this is back, interesting, right? Back to our state of Ibor in Hayom Yom, right? We're all connected. And we're all connected at that seminal point of origin. So the Torah is there. That Torah is Chochmah. Chochmah is the Yud of Hashem's name. The Yud is just a drop, a point. So it's always likened to that seminal drop from which all kinds of formations and differentiations will come out. But at root, it's singular. So when we draw down from there, we're drawing down to the root of all neshamas as well as to our own neshama. Which this root of all neshamas goes by a few names. One name is in the back inside is Shechina. Shechina is the point where everything comes down. This is Malchus. In this case, we're talking Malchus of Ein Sof, not Malchus of Atzilus, not Malchus of anybody, Malchus of Ein Sof, the Malchus of the Infinite One. That's one name. It's called Shechina, and this is called Knesset Yisrael. Knesset means the gathering place where all things come together. Back to our Ibor in our Yom Yom, where all things are resolved and originate from a singular point. Knesset Yisrael, which is Shechina, Knesset Yisrael. This is the Makor Kol Neshamas Yisrael, is the source of origin of all the Jewish souls, as will be elaborated at length in later parts of Tanya. So this is the Torah. This is the Torah. It's the seminal drop of energy that expands itself and is responsible for the multiplicity of all the world and for how that is actually going to be designed, because the Torah is the blueprint. As again, back to the Zohar, he looked into the Torah in order to create the world. So, and through that, one draws down the Or Ein Sof through the Isaac and Torah, one draws down that light into oneself and into the worlds. Through Al Yidei Esek HaTorah, through occupation, again, occupation, not just casual, but occupation. We've talked about Kevias Itim, making fixed times for Torah, through Isaac Torah, which when a person learns Torah, and I've also learned that to be yotzi, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, one has to bring it into one's mouth, and that's called koyra b'Torah, kriya. So one is oisik Torah, when to fulfill the mitzvah of Torah, one is nikras b'loshen kriya. It's called kriya, which parenthetically happens to be the name of the book we just started this week, Vayikra, the same word, kriya. And it's an interesting ride. The very first Rashi in Vayikra says that this word Vayikra, he called, is loshen chiba, dearness, endearment. So when we learn the Torah, we're creating a close, the word is endearment, a loving relationship, a very dear and precious relationship between us and God by calling out. Kriya loshen chiba. That's the Rashi, the first Rashi in this week's parsha. And that's called koyra b'Torah, right? When you, a Baal Koyra, when someone reads the Torah, he's called a Baal Koyra. He's not called a reader, he's called a calling outer. So he's koyra b'Torah, which means, Pirish, when a person is occupied in Torah, the way you're supposed to be, saying the words, one is actually calling out to Hashem to come to him. If you could say such a thing, like a person who calls out to his friend, to come to him. So learning Torah is developing the friendship between us and God. A relationship we haven't talked about, we don't hear about too much. There's the relation of Yiras Hashem, Avos Hashem, but here's a relationship of friendship. Likewise, or we can give another mashal, like a small child who calls to his father, the father-child relationship. So when one reads Torah, that's what's happening. When one is learning Torah, oisik b'Torah, that's what's happening. You're calling Hashem, lavoi alav, to come to him. To be with him in one bond. And not to be separate from him. And not be separate from him and leave us singular and alone and not connected with him. Chas v'sholom. And this is what's written, Korav Hashem l'chol kerov. It's written, Hashem is close to all who call upon him. And the Chazal say, l'chol ashikruhu be'emes, to all who call upon him in truth, and ein emes ela Torah. All who call upon him in truth, and there is no truth except for Torah. This is from a midrash. Ein emes ela Torah. Dahainu shekoyel HaKadosh Baruch Hu al yedei HaTorah, one calls out to Hashem through the Torah, dafka. This is the way that one calls out, and call lashon chiba, develops a endearing, loving, close friendship, father-son, child-parent relationship to Hashem. That's the way to do it, dafka specifically. Which excludes one who calls out to God, not in the context of Torah, just cries out. I mean, that has a function, obviously. I mean, cry out your heart to God. This is the beginning of Shuvah, right? But this is a different kind of expression than koyra b'Torah, when you call out to Hashem b'Torah. So it's different than calling out to Hashem, which not through the occupation in Torah. But one just cries out, Father, Father, please, in his own words. And again, to point out, this is not saying this is important. This is part of the Avoda, also to cry out to Hashem, particularly in the days of awe, in the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, etc. But it's a different kind of relationship. That's the kind of begging for forgiveness. Please, Hashem, please give. Yes, yes. We're not pleading with Hashem when we're learning Torah. We're on it's hard to say this, but on a parent-child, two friend, equal, even some, friendship, if it's on two equals. Be my friend, be my buddy, be my father, be my, I'm your son, I'm your daughter. And that's the way, and this is established simply by being oisik b'Torah, because the Torah is connecting with the Torah is an intimate connection with Hashem. But as the Navi said, back on the side of crying out help me, help me, help me. So the Navi says, "Ein kora b'shimcha." That's the idea. You're not calling out using Hashem's name. Hashem's name, where do you find Hashem's name? Every letter of Torah. Every letter of Torah is part of God himself. As is written in another place. Okay, he gives us a lechein. So having said all this, every person, hamaskil, everyone who's got some head on his or her shoulder, who's understood this, should contemplate, should meditate. Lahamshit alav yira gadoila. That when you're learning Torah, since the fact is, as we've said, you should contemplate and think about that you are drawing down on yourself yira gadoila, a great, great awe, b'shas oisik Torah, in the time of learning Torah, as we've said above in Perek 23. That's today's Tanya. Okay, questions, comments? It's gewalt, no? I mean, how much? I'm saying this to myself. We're learning Torah, aren't we? We're learning Torah right now, and we're drawing upon ourselves the Or Ein Sof, not only the Or Ein, but the sort of original point of the effusion of the Or Ein Sof, which is Chachmas Hashem, the wisdom of Hashem, and as we're doing this, it's penetrating, covering, encompassing our souls and drawing down Or Ein Sof into the world at large, and infusing the source of all Jewish souls, at their source, with an extra dose of chayas from the fact that we're doing it. So think about that. There's binding in that. Yeah, Rivka.
Good morning. Hi. It's beautiful. It also arouses the idea that, and maybe this is part of the truth of the Torah, that it's really a means to an end. And although sometimes it appears to be an end in itself, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. I mean, there's different ways of that's a question of avoda, really. And the difference maybe between Hasidus and other approaches, where Torah and mitzvahs is an end in itself, or a means to an end to get closer to Hashem, and what your attitude is. That's interesting.
Right. Good. Well, there are a lot of ends. It's a means to many different ends, and the one we're focusing on here is that it draws down the end, the accomplishment of it is infusing. It's like you have a neshama, and then your neshama, every time you learn Torah, it's getting a huge boost because an infusion, if you will, of the Or Ein Sof. So it gives a huge boost, and therefore you could say, Gadol Torah Shemei B'Ladei Ma'aser. You've aggrandized in a certain way through your Torah, and it gives you a kayach to go out and do Ma'aser with a different quality than if the Ma'aser is done without the Torah infusion.
Personal, yeah. Personal experience difference.
Elisheva, your hand is up.
I just wanted to share that yesterday I was at the Ohel and I saw a video where the Rebbe was talking about this. And he was saying when you're asking for Hashem for stuff, you're a receiver and you kind of powerless. And he didn't like that. He said, when we learn Torah, we are contributing and we become partners with Hashem through our contribution in learning Torah. And then we're not receivers, we're equal partners.
Right, that's the notion of friendship, what we put on the table. You become chaverim, right? Chaverim, as you all know probably, chaverim is the Lashon chibur, right? To connect on an equal plane. Beautiful. Yehudis?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Question again. So if our learning Torah is like having a friendship relationship with Hashem, can you explain then what doing mitzvot, what kind of relationship we have with Hashem when we're doing the mitzvahs?
Well, the simplest way, mitzvah is lessons of commandment. It's the relation of a let's call it, if it's a commandment, a person who's being commanded by someone who's superior to the person. Now, it's also true, and maybe this is behind your question, that mitzvah is also tzavta v'chibur, joining, but it's a different kind of joining. You are doing what Hashem is commanding you to do. Here, you and he are learning together.
So here it's more of a horizontal relationship.
Yeah, that's good. This is a horizontal, the other good, vertical. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Rivka, you're back?
I'm back. Which brings to mind, Yudas, your question, is the two aspects of Avoda, being the Eved or the Ben. And I
Right.
think that works here in the sense that it also says the father and the son, they're like equals, because the son is like a copy of the father.
Yeah.
And the Eved is a different thing. And there's advantages of both.
Right.
You have to be both, but it fits here. So I thought
and even though learning Torah is an avoda, right? It's part of the avoda. But yeah, right. It's interesting. As we keep coming back to this Torah, its dual qualities. On the one hand, it has a superiority, and it's an effusion from above and creates this. And on the other hand, Godel Torah Shemei B'Levei Mitzvahs, it brings you to becoming. There's an avoda of Torah. So that, because Torah is a mitzvah after all. So it's a twofold, right? It's a mitzvah. We are commanded to learn the Torah. That's one of the 613 mitzvahs, and it evolves into many. So it has this twofold quality. It creates the equality because you're on the wavelength, and at the same time you're part and parcel of the system, which is the mitzvah system. Sarah in Eretz Yisrael. Your hand is up. It was up.
Shalom Aleichem. Do both. The question is really on both learning Torah and even mitzvot. Do both have levels to them in terms of a person's kavanah, a person's intent, or even in just the doing, even if you didn't have a lot of kavanah, is there still that indwelling factor, that connection factor happening just in the doing, even if one did not have kavanah?
Yeah, mitzvah b'lo shelo b'kavanah. It's still a mitzvah. If you do a mitzvah without kavanah, you've obeyed the letter of the law. But just translate that into your daily life. There's a difference between I have to and I did versus I'm impassioned about doing it. It's going to be a wholly different quality of doing. But yeah, you fulfill the mitzvah by just doing.
Right, that's mitzvah. What about Torah learning?
Well, to the extent that it's a mitzvah, yeah. It's a mitzvah. I say to be limited Torah is a mitzvah, so you can learn without kavanah also. You be yaitze zayin, right? I did my Kviyas Itim today. I did my Rambam today, right? Yeah, but the difference is that just by saying those letters and those words, this thing that we spoke about on this page is happening. Your experience
that's really my question. Is it happening? I didn't mean like a person is really bleak kavanah. I meant, is it happening even if a person doesn't have clear intention, a lot of intention?
Yeah. Yes. The answer is yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's happening. It's happening.
Better with kavanah.
Yeah. Chayenka.
Yeah. My question is, and maybe you just answered it, when you talked about crying out to Hashem during learning is different than, just crying out to Hashem or during davening. Because when you're learning, is it the kavanah in the learning? But I'm wondering how you elicit that cry to Hashem during learning.
Okay, you have a little twist that's off on the wrong foot at the beginning. You're not crying out to Hashem during the learning. The learning itself is crying out to Hashem. When you're koyra b'torah, when you call out, it's the difference between calling out and soik liboy, which is calling, which is like screaming of the heart. Tzoik libo, the heart screams out. You're not screaming, you're calling to him. So it's not like when you say, God, please help me. That's tzoik libo. It's a different word. Torah b'Torah is you're just calling out. You are saying the words. I'm saying the words right now. Here's Vayikra el Moshe v'yedaber Hashem el Moshe lemer. That's just saying those words is what we're calling the calling out.
Oh, it's that connecting during learning. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. You got it.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay, so I think, does someone have a bechein? If not, I'm just going to repeat the bechein that the Alter Rebbe told us. Anybody have a bechein from this?
Learn Torah and bring Hashem into your life.
Right. And the Alter Rebbe goes a little bit further and says, I'm just reading again the last line. And from all that we've said, and including all that we've just said, thank God, Yizbainin hamaskil, a smart person should contemplate and meditate that when this is the kavanah part of learning Torah, right? The mitzvah itself creates that relationship, but have the kavanah, call down that when you're doing this, you're drawing down to yourself, and he added up above to the world at large, a great level of awesome experience of Hashem at the time that you learn Torah. So put your kavanah into it and live with it. All right? Till we meet again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Good Chodesh.
Chodesh
Good
Tov,
Friday.
Chodesh Tov. Thank you very much. Good day.